Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into the hidden machinery of American power, specifically the CIA. Is it this all-powerful, shadowy government pulling the strings, or is it something way more ordinary?
I mean, listen to this quote from security analyst Scott Ritter. That's a heavy accusation, right? It paints this picture of a super effective, ruthless organization that just steamrolls its way across the globe to get what it wants.
But is that the whole story? There's this completely different take, and it comes from inside the agency. So to really get to the bottom of this, we're going to look at two completely different kinds of operations. First, a proxy war that had just devastating consequences. And second, a much quieter campaign of influence, right inside Washington, D.C.
All right, so first up, Afghanistan, 1979. This is where a U.S. operation, designed to basically bleed the Soviet Union dry, ended up planting the seeds for a conflict that would come back to haunt America. You've probably heard the term for it, blowback.
So this timeline really lays out how a simple Cold War tactic just completely spiraled out of control. The idea was simple, right? Give the Soviets their own Vietnam. It all kicks off in '79, when the Soviets invade. Pretty soon after, the CIA starts Operation Cyclone, arming the Mujahideen fighters. By the mid-'80s, the Reagan doctrine just opens the floodgates. Money and seriously advanced weapons are pouring in. And it worked, in a way. The Soviets pull out, totally defeated in '89. But here's the thing. Those fighters America armed, they didn't just pack up and go home. And by 2001, some of those very factions had morphed into Al-Qaeda.
Okay, so how did all this money and all these weapons actually get to the fighters on the ground? This is absolutely crucial. The CIA didn't do it directly. They basically outsourced the entire job to Pakistan's intelligence agency, the ISI. Now, the ISI, they had their own agenda. They made sure that the most radical, the most anti-Western fundamentalist groups got the best stuff. They were cultivating their own future allies. And you know, people inside the US were raising red flags, warning that they were backing some really dangerous people. But those warnings were just ignored.
And this really gets to the heart of the problem. The US had zero long-term vision for Afghanistan. Pakistan, on the other hand, absolutely did. Once the Soviets were gone, America's only real interest was, hey, can we buy back some of those Stinger missiles we handed out? That was it. No plan for rebuilding, no thought for the country's future. And into that power vacuum steps the Taliban, with Pakistan's full backing to take over.
So that's one kind of influence. Long-range, covert, messy. But what about a different kind? One that's a lot closer to home and way more direct. We're gonna shift gears now, from the battlefields of Afghanistan to the hallways of power in Washington, D.C. It's a completely different playbook.
You see, the end goal might be pretty similar. You want to shape US policy to help out another country's interests. But the tactics? Man, they are worlds apart. We're not talking about guns and missiles anymore. The weapons here are cash, access, and a whole lot of political pressure.
Okay, so there's this law called FARA, the Foreign Agents Registration Act. And the idea is pretty simple. If you're in the US working for a foreign interest, you have to register, you have to disclose who you are and what you're doing. Now, former CIA officer John Kiriakou brings up a fascinating point. He had to register as a foreign agent just for writing 6 op-eds for the Abu Dhabi Chamber of Commerce. 6! Yet one of the most powerful lobbying groups in DC, AIPAC, doesn't have that requirement. Now, let's be super clear here. This isn't a CIA op. This is about foreign lobbying. But Kiriakou's perspective as an intelligence guy is what makes this comparison so interesting. So, how does this kind of influence actually work? What's in the toolkit? Well, the sources talk about a few things. First, all expenses-paid trips to the Holy Land for congressional staffers. Then there's funding primary challengers to kick out politicians who are too critical. And get this, there's a personal AIPAC person for almost every single member of Congress, right in their district, to make sure there's constant contact, constant alignment on policy.
In this quote right here, it comes from a wild story Kiriakou tells. It was his very first liaison briefing at the CIA. He's meeting with an officer from Israel's Shin Bet intelligence service, and the guy immediately starts trying to profile him to maybe even recruit him, right there in his first meeting. So Kiriakou goes and tells his boss, and everyone in the room just starts laughing. His supervisor says, yeah, they've done that to every single one of us. It's like they can't help themselves. Just shockingly common.
Okay, so this all brings us right back to that central question, that paradox. On the one hand, we've seen an operation that created total, catastrophic blowback. On the other, we see this system of incredibly effective influence right here at home. So which is it? Is the intelligence community this sinister, brilliant machine, or is it something else entirely?
So when you put it all together, the sources we're looking at give us two completely opposite portraits of the CIA. You've got Scott Ritter's mastermind view, a ruthless, super effective deep state where overthrowing governments is just task number one. And then you have the insider, John Kiriakou's bureaucrat view, a big, slow, clumsy organization where everyone's just trying to protect their own career.
And Kiriakou really doubles down on this. As someone who was in the CIA, he says flat out, it's a big, lumbering bureaucracy with a lot of stupid people. It's not like the James Bond movies. I mean, that just shatters the whole myth of the super slick, hyper-competent secret agent, right? He's suggesting the real threat isn't some evil master plan, but just good old-fashioned bureaucratic screw-ups.
And to prove his point, he tells this one story from the field that is just unbelievable. They're all geared up for a huge raid on an Al-Qaeda safe house in Pakistan. It's a critical mission. And then the team just starts to fall apart. Agent number 1 can't go. Why? He beat his wife, so he's not allowed to carry a gun. Agent number 2 can't go either. He had some kind of psychological break that morning and had to be evacuated. So they're forced to go ahead with this mission with a depleted team. He's basically saying, see, this is the messy reality. It's a far cry from what you see in the movies.
And it's not just in the field. He tells another story from back at headquarters. He gets this urgent cable, something they need to act on right now. He rushes in to brief the agency's top 8 leaders, but before he can even start, his boss, the deputy director, stops him and says, "Stop. You and I are the only people in the room cleared for this information. The other 6 leaders weren't cleared to know. The system is so wrapped up in its own secrecy that it can't even function properly." All right, so what are the big takeaways here? Well, first, U.S. foreign policy can have these disastrous long-term consequences, that blowback we talked about. Second, foreign influence is a real thing, and it works both out in the open through lobbying and in the shadows through espionage. Third, you have these two completely opposite views of the CIA, the super competent deep state versus the bumbling bureaucracy. And that leads to the final point. Whether it's a calculated plan or just chaotic incompetence, both can be incredibly dangerous when you've got that much power.
So that leaves us with this huge, unsettling question. Which is the greater threat? Is it a hidden, masterful plan that we can't even see? Or is it powerful, chaotic incompetence that we just can't control? It's a tough one, because maybe the real danger isn't one or the other. Maybe the real threat is when you get both at the same time. Moments of terrifying, brilliant competence followed by catastrophic, bureaucratic blindness.